All right, well, hi all, and welcome to Microsegmentation in 2025. Is it really the fastest path to zero trust and risk reduction? Now, today's fascinating webinar is sponsored by Elisity and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, a future B2B company, and I am so happy that I get to be here with you all today as your moderator because we have lots of interesting content to explore together in our conversation today, and our speakers are really looking forward to engaging with all of you in an interactive conversation. So we really want to get those questions from you today. Make sure you've got those, stretch your fingers out, get ready, and get ready to ask some questions. In fact, we're actually just going to dive right into our audience console tour here today, as I really want to hear from you as we go through our day. So let's start out with the chat, the docs, and the Q&A. Those are on the right-hand side of your screen. Now the chat, I see you guys are already doing this. I love this. Hey, Michael. Hey, Dennis. We've got Sujit and Paul, Zhang, and James, and Samuel, Corey coming in from Wisconsin, and then James from Florida. Oy. All right, James, I don't want to hear about your weather. We've got a whole awesome crew here today, and I do want to hear about your weather, James. In fact, I want to hear from all of you, so please do send those highs and hellos as we go through our day. The chat is a great place for you to connect, reach out to the folks that are here with us behind the scenes, but it's also a great way for all of you to connect with each other, get to know the community, get to know all the folks that are here with us today, learning alongside us. So if you have those interesting stories or thoughts or ideas that you'd like to share with the other members of our audience, post in that chat, send them some emojis, let them know how you're doing today. We want to see that happen all day through. All right, so that's what's happening in the chat tab. Now we're going to take two little jumps over to the Q&A tab. The Q&A tab is where you're asking questions directly of our speakers. So if chat is full of highs and hellos, the Q&A is full of those insightful and inquisitive questions that you have about microsegmentation. And I know you're going to have a lot, so make sure you're getting those questions into the Q&A tab. We are leaving a lot of time to get into those questions with you when we get to the end of our session today. So make sure you're getting those questions in so that we can dig in and explore those with our wonderful expert presenters that are here with us. So chat, highs and hellos, Q&A, all your questions for our speakers. Now the chat window is also where you can reach out to our team if you do have any technical issues today. Hopefully that doesn't come up. Hopefully we have a tech gremlin-free day. But if something gets in the system today, the first thing you're going to try is a little browser refresh. It's the equivalent of the have you tried turning it off and on again, right? So try a little browser refresh, see how that works. If that does not work for you, you can post a message in the chat, and Arena Chen is here with us today. She's going to be there answering some questions, and she is amazing. She's going to be keeping everything running smoothly today. So if you have any questions, you post them in the chat, and I see, yep, Arena's already getting some answers coming through to all of you right now. So keep those coming in. All right, so that's the chat, that's the Q&A. The last place that I want to draw your attention to is the Docs tab. Now the Docs tab is absolutely full of cool resources and takeaways. You are going to take in a lot of information today. There's going to be a lot coming your way. And the Docs tab is a great way to make sure that you can follow up and actually take action on some of the cool things that you're learning about. So do explore that Docs tab, open those tabs, hold on to those because you will want them after we wrap. The very last thing I'm going to point out, you see on the screen there, and I know your eyes went right to it, we've got that prize tab there for you. So we do have a prize that we will be giving away at the end of our webinar. So there is a $250 Amazon gift card going to one lucky winner here with us live at the webinar. Now, here's the thing. You do need to be with us all the way through the webinar, and you do need to meet all of the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you are not sure what those T's and C's are, we have them linked for you in the Docs tab, so you can head on over and check those out. All right, well, we got all the housekeeping out of the way because I am very excited to get into our session, and there is just a lot to cover today. As you can see, this topic is a very interesting one. We are talking today about microsegmentation, and we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the state of microsegmentation today in 2025. Here we are, well into 2025 now, which is absolutely wild. And what I want to do, actually, I said at the top here, is that we wanted to spend a lot of time chatting with you today. We want to hear a lot from all of our wonderful community members here. So I've just opened up a poll, and I'm going to ask all of you to hop over to that poll tab and let us know what best describes your microsegmentation initiatives in your organization. Do you feel like you're still in that kind of taking forever phase? Do you feel like you have no active projects on the go, or happily deployed? You're rolling it, you're basking in the sunshine, you're hanging out in the meadow on the other side of the project. Let us know where you're at on this. We really want to hear from you, and it's going to help our speakers kind of direct and make sure that they're hitting you with the content that's going to be most useful as we go through our session today. So I'm going to leave that poll open for another second here, and then I will let you know where we landed on those results. But I do want to, again, just go through a little bit of an agenda with all of you. As you can see here, we've got a lot to cover. We are digging into how everyone out there in the audience, can implement microsegmentation in weeks, not years. That's huge. In order to accelerate zero trust adoption, strengthen security, and maintain compliance. All of the coolest things, right? All the important things. Now, one of the best things about our discussion today is that we're not just talking about this in the high level. We're not just talking about this in the theoretical. We're actually going to delve into a real world example. So we're going to be talking about Andelyn Biosciences. They recently deployed 2,700 microsegmentation policies to protect their pharmaceutical research and manufacturing environments without disrupting operations or requiring new network hardware. I'm going to say that again. Over 2,000 microsegmentation policies without disrupting operations or requiring new network hardware. That is incredible. I am very excited to get into this case study and hear from our speakers today a little bit more detail about that. Now, I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful speakers before I bring them out here, and then we'll get things rolling. So today we are going to be talking with Bryan Holmes, VP of Information Technology at Andelyn Biosciences, and Pete Doolittle, Chief Customer Officer at Elisity. Now, Pete and Bryan, I'm very excited to get into this conversation with you both today. I know we want to leave quite a bit of time to get into some Q&A with the folks at the end. We've got a lot to cover. Before we dive in, I promised everyone that I would tell them what the results were from the poll. So just a moment here. We are at about 60% in the taking forever vote, about 60% in the taking forever phase of the microsegmentation initiative. That is wild. Okay, well, I'm hoping that we're all going to get some advice and ideas on how we can maybe speed that up a little bit. But I'm curious to hear from you, Pete and Bryan, if that kind of lines up with your experiences, with your expectations. So hopefully we can get a little more insight into that. Pete, I'm going to hand things on over to you. Take it away.
Thanks, Jess. And Bryan, great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, great to be here.
Definitely. And, I'm sure, like you, not surprised by that poll survey result. Taking forever at 60+% of the audience reaction there. I mean, that's really the reason that Elisity exists. When most of our leadership team comes from the likes of Cisco, Meraki, Viptela, Palo, and we saw this concept of microsegmentation for large customers was really just too challenging and too difficult to deploy at scale, non-disruptively in these really sensitive environments. And for folks like you, Bryan, to have confidence in deploying enforced deny policies rapidly. And thus, our mission since we've gotten going has really been to deploy sites in less than an hour in a non-disruptive, no hardware, no agent way, to be able to really provide converged visibility on all your devices and to be extremely flexible in our methodology for policy activation. So no, I am not surprised by that result. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, Bryan, in microsegmentation. First of all, can you elaborate a little bit on the challenges that Andelyn had when you were looking at visibility into both managed, unmanaged, wired, wireless, IT, IoT, OT devices? Like, sort of how did that all come about?
Yeah, no. So thanks for the question there. And as we started out on our digital journey back in 2020 and 2021, we aligned our overall IT strategy to our business strategy, and then our cyber strategy around those two areas. And as we were building out a new facility, we wanted to build a facility with Industry 4.0 standards in place. We wanted to have a connected plant. We wanted to make sure our devices and our data were used in the way that they're designed in today's day and age. So as we were building out and designing our facilities, state-of-the-art facilities, we needed state-of-the-art systems, and likewise, we needed state-of-the-art security in order to manage our environment and get the visibility into it. So as we started moving into the facility in 2022, getting our devices online, we had gone through a different evaluation path that I know we'll get to in a bit, but we wanted to make sure that our equipment was online, that we had visibility into it, that we were able to ensure that we were not putting our company at risk by having a connected plant strategy.
And how about the convergence of IT, IoT, and OT devices on the same network? How did that lead to some security and operational challenges?
Yeah, from everything being on a single network, you look at the, really what happens if something goes wrong, and how do you isolate isolate your risks? How do you isolate the proliferation of issues across the entire ecosystem? And so looking at with the types of devices we were bringing in, wanting to set things up, we didn't want any sort of physical separation of our network. We were going 100% Arista across the board from our network strategy, but then really looking at how to secure that to make sure that there was no implication from doing such a design.
And I know you don't have a massive network and security team, so like many of your peers, you have to do more with less. But your goal, as you see on the right side here in your quote, was to really get policies deployed and activated within the first 90 days. So can you get on, give us a little more color around why that was so imperative to go so quick?
Yeah, one of our guiding principles was to have things designed with security in mind. So we don't have, as you mentioned, a large team. We don't have a separate security team. We don't have separation really of from network and security and a bunch of large scale teams to be able to manage these areas. So the idea is that if you're designing it up front and doing it correctly, it shouldn't become an impediment. It should become an enabler of your business. It should become an enabler of your network strategy. So if you're thinking about security from the beginning and the get-go to be able to deploy things with security in mind, it shouldn't necessarily require additional resources to do that.
So when we go back in the time machine, Bryan, we first met back in 2021, 2022, when you were kind of right at the beginning of your evaluation process. Can you kind of give us a little bit of color around this entire process that you've gone through? Because there's quite a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah. So as we carved out from Nationwide Children's Hospital and became our own legal entity in 2020, we had greenfield opportunity for our IT ecosystem, building out the new company, knowing that we were going to have a facility, having a lot of equipment that was connected, having upwards of, right now we're at about 250 employees, and then continue to grow from there. So we had to look at every single system and solution across the entire IT space. One of those, with again mentioning the guiding principles of designing with security in mind, we wanted to go with the zero trust approach and microsegmentation being a key component of that up front. We met, I can't remember if we were still in stealth mode or not when we had first started having the conversations, but was really impressed with the thought process that you were going down. It was just you weren't quite there yet from the ability to support the Arista environment, and still I'd say earlier days for you. We went through the evaluation, looking at some of the different areas, and landed on Forescout for our deployment here. Part of the reason why we went with Forescout as well is they were utilized by the our company that we're carving out from there, and we thought they might be able to get some expertise and some help in deployment. And even though we're completely separate, it was something we were looking at doing there. What we found as we started putting all these pieces together of the puzzle was not everything played as nicely together as we had hoped from whiteboard sessions and design sessions and other things. And one of those that we certainly found as our projects. If you remember back in 22, it was a whole different world back then. That supply chain issues and other things. We ended up building a second facility in the interim bit before finishing our first facility. So we're going through that. The amount of time and effort it was taking to stand up our actual environment took a lot longer than we had anticipated because of the second facility and being able to bring everything together. And then the management of Forescout ended up being something that we were never actually able to get over the hump. So it became a strategic solution and desire for us from a security perspective. It was really heavy for us to manage and achieve the value proposition that we had hoped to achieve.
other than that, what were some of the other key lessons learned from that experience, as you know, as you kind of went through that journey into trying to integrate it with other platforms, when trying to get policies activated? What were some of the lessons learned?
Yeah, and going through it, trying to understand and look at what kind of policies you should be looking at, right? We were trying to project network traffic for a network that didn't exist yet, so there were some challenges around those areas. The simplicity of policy, creation, simulation, deployment is something that, how do you understand the impact of something you're doing to the network to ensure that your user experience isn't impacted. And for us, being the fact that we're in manufacturing of gene therapy treatments for rare disease and ultra rare disease community, if we have something that happens and a batch fails because of a security incident, or conversely because we've done that to ourselves by causing our equipment to go down or our communication to go down, those batches can take upwards of 4, 5, 6 weeks to produce, and longer to then be released into the either clinical trials or commercial side of it. And there's really downstream patient impact of that. So again, we were trying to put on all of the right lenses around what we were trying to do, but really understanding what the risks are from a business risk perspective, understanding the technical risks, understanding operational risks is critical to then being able to really defend against that too.
So you put a lot of time, obviously, into that solution and trying to get it operational. At one point in 2024, you sort of made the executive decision here. Let's reevaluate and let's come back, and we got reengaged. What made you then move forward Elisity? What was the kind of drivers for that decision?
Yeah, so when we talked and Elisity brought in support for the Arista devices, that was obviously a critical point for us. We had several discussions with the IT team here at Andelyn, going through, is this something we want to continue to invest in and go forward with on Forescout, or are we better off to take a step back and reevaluate where we're at? And was it going to be throwing good money after bad at a certain point in time? And based on the discussions that we had and the amount of time and effort that it was taking to get to any policy deployment, which again, evidenced by the poll earlier, is something we're all facing. It was a discussion of, do we ever see us getting there? And if we are, is our total cost of ownership really going to be what we had anticipated it being? So we made the difficult decision to take a step back and look at our ecosystem. And then the easy decision was to reach out to Elisity and engage in a proof of concept to see if it really could do what's been promoted.
And that POC, from my recollection, went pretty well. Quick to deploy, quick to discover all the devices, integrate into your ecosystems, and then even we did some policy testing all in a 2-day period, if I recall.
Yeah, I'd say I think we made it further in the first 2 days of the POC than we did in the first 2 years of deployment previous to that. So it was great, and I like to highlight the fact that it's not always everything goes well and it's smooth. That you really learn a lot more when there are potential issues or things that come up. And when we had a small issue early on in the POC, the response of the engineering team, basically going over whether I forget it was a weekend or overnight to be able to get a fix in place and to get that deployed pretty quickly. The response to that was something that really helped us get a true measure of what life in a productive environment would be like with Elisity.
Yeah, I do recall that weekend, Bryan. So thank you for that. When we then move forward in the winter timeframe into the actual deployment, we got contracts done pretty quickly, and then because you were pretty eager to actually get moving on this, our team came out to Columbus and did a policy workshop, and then spent the next day actually, deploying all of the policy groups. And I think one of the things that was great is that you're really looking at the different methodologies, subnet-based policy groups, general device-based policy groups for some of the IT stuff, and then local custom policy groups. But just us getting up and running with Active Directory and CrowdStrike, and using our open connector to use your local spreadsheets of the kind of OT databases and things like that. This all went, I think, really smoothly for us to actually get the basic infrastructure going. I think that was really only 2 or 3 days from that perspective as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough about that initial engagement. I mean, obviously a lot was done in the POC time period, but when we went forward with this, and the first couple of days, the ease of implementation and getting to a point of being able to create and implement the policies was something unheard of, right? That being able to do that in that manner, to be able to see things, the visual aspect of the tool, the simulation side of it, being able to compartmentalize things pretty quickly, and the expertise that your team brought in to be able to do that and get us up and going. I know it built a lot of excitement within the small team, built a lot of excitement for where we're going with it. So that was a great success.
Yeah, and just I know this is a kind of an eyesore to see, but the concept of our identity graph, where we are correlating across CrowdStrike, across Active Directory, and across those local spreadsheets to truly understand, does everybody agree this is a PC? Does everybody agree this is a server? Does everybody agree, in the case of HMIs, PLCs, et cetera, are we clear as to what these devices are? And I think one of the things that your team and even you were pretty excited about was, for once, you now knew every single managed, unmanaged, wired, wireless, IT, IoT, and OT device that was on the network, and it was correlated across multiple systems. So I think that was a pretty good driver for the confidence in starting to accelerate the actual policy activation.
Yeah, when you get into the device visibility and, again, understanding the implications of everything and how it all comes together in an environment, there's a lot to it, and the simpler that it's made for teams to be able to consume that information, the better off we are. And really being, going through an entire new facility build out, that things, may, with different equipment. Well, how is this utilized? How is this piece brought onto a network? What are we doing? This other thing, like this was the first time we were really able to justify all, and make sure that we knew what we had everywhere.
Yeah, and I think even without any of those integrations, your team was pretty happy with just on the native discovery, what we were actually just natively discovering right away, what was accurate in itself. So just the level of confidence to start the project with that was pretty good. And then I think the other thing that the team was pretty pleased with was the methodology that we collectively built really quickly around how to go from what we're calling learning mode into simulation mode and then activation mode, and really taking an approach that would say, let's start with the security level 1 stuff, like mobile devices and phones and things like that are more IT focused. Build the level of confidence within a week. Within 1 week, we had all those global IT policies activated and enforced, deny across the board. And then moving and looking into the more challenging stuff, which is the subnet-based policy groups in OT, and obviously the custom manufacturing OT local policy groups, we call them, and building out that methodology. What did you think about that as a kind of a leader, seeing that process unfold over a couple of weeks?
When we look at any solution that we're deploying anywhere, we look at what are best practices, what are ways of getting things. How do you get further faster? It's always what I'm asking for my team and for any vendor partner that we work with. Let's get further faster. When I look at this here, kind of to summarize, it's like a common sense accelerator. You're able to take a number of different things from different areas and utilize that and come up with the initial set of policies to get us off the ground running. So what does that then enable? It enables, adoption of the tool much faster and the solution. It enables the team to learn as well when you look at some of those, accelerators and, standard types of, global policies that would be put in. And then when you get into some of the learning mode and the simulation mode, you look at things that when you get the low hanging fruit out of the way, you can start to really dig into the details more. So for me, it was really a great activity, and being able to go through and see how you can knock things out quickly with limited risk, and also build in the capabilities of the team and understanding in that process. So I really I was very impressed by it.
Well, I thank you, and in that, I think one of the things that you've given us a lot of kudos for behind the scenes is our approach to the customer experience, which includes both the customer support, which you mentioned earlier, and the customer success team that you also mentioned earlier around, the kind of consulting best practices, deployment, planning, et cetera. One of the things that we spent a lot of time with your team doing is the training, is the kind of certification. And I know some of the folks are running through the certification classes now to make sure that they are officially Elisity certified policy administrators on their own. But, anything else on our our whole success and support experience for those that, are used to other kind of platforms like this?
Yeah, I think when we look at the the engagement right at after signing the contract, right, that there was I think discussions when I put in the let's have the 90-day goal to having our policies up and completed. There was, I'd say, the excitement about going in and making sure that these were realized, and I can't remember if you said it somewhat. You're not going to let us off the hook and not have policies in. We're going to have weekly meetings. We're going to have sessions. We're going to be going through this. You're going to have technical expertise and professional expertise in here, making sure that we're getting the value out of the solution that we've purchased, versus it being a pump and dump type of sale. Here you go, and move on to the next customer. That it was really engaging to make sure that you live, eat, breathe security, and you want to make sure that your customers are feeling that. And every time we've had an engagement, we'll send a note on the side, like the heart emoji. We love Elisity, love the team we're talking to, love the technical expertise, love the drive to understanding and solving a problem. So to me, it's been second to none in groups that we've worked with, and I've really appreciated that from everyone there.
And I think for us, it's funny. We have our customer advisory board. And, right after you guys signed up as a customer, some of your team jumped into the customer advisory board, and a couple of your key team members are launching feature requests left and right into the platform, and very engaged. And I think, we've already produced a number of features based on some of that feedback in, again, less than 90 days. So, that is something that we were very keen on, is listening to the power users. And your team has quickly become power users and really has been able to drive some of that feature stuff right away for us.
Yeah, and I think that's an important component of the customer advisory board side of things. That the more that we're able to all kind of contribute together and build out the ecosystem, I think the better off everyone benefits from that. So we're happy that to have people participate in that from our side. And likewise, learn from other customers and contribute to the product. It's together we're a more secure world if we're working in that manner.
So, we're a couple months into the journey here, and we're already at outcomes and business impacts. For you, just summarize it up for us. Like, what's been sort of as you're having your meetings up at the executive level and beyond the C-suite, what are you telling them about the kind of success of the project?
Yeah. So as we talk through every quarter, we have a quarterly cybersecurity governance board. And the one that's coming up at the end of this month, we're going to be highlighting all the impacts we made from this implementation. We had an executive tabletop exercise in October, right around the time that we were starting to launch into the initiative. And to be able to now talk to the successes that we've gotten from there is something that's, really exciting. So people are, certainly aware of what we've been able to do. But as I started out, when I mentioned the sort of the triangulation of the business strategy to the IT strategy and digital strategy, and then the cyber strategy to support that, by having all of the connected devices into a network, being able to stream data, pull data from there, making sure that we feel good about our ability to continue operations in situation that something were to occur, I think that's, completely de-risked our organization, and something that we're going to be able to use as a selling point to our customers, that our cyber strategy becomes a competitive differentiator for us as people want to come to us and make sure that we have the resilience built up in our network and our infrastructure and our setup. So a lot of really, really great things to be able to talk about with the with both our sales team, educate them on why they can talk to their prospects and our customers about what why this differentiates us from others, and likewise internally from a finance and legal side of it, being able to talk through from our cyber insurance side of it, why we feel better about that. So there's all different areas where you can now start to really quantify the impact of having a solution like this in place.
Yeah, I want to double click on that. You said cyber insurance, audits, things like that. Are you seeing solutions like this, not necessarily Elisity, but solutions like this really improving your scores and holding off on the massive insurance jumps that we've seen in the past? Like, how is that playing out in real time?
Yeah, so it's certainly been an evolving space over the last couple of years. I think that as the insurance industry started to learn more about both the quantifying the risks associated with cyber incidents and what they're able to do there, that the pendulum swung a little bit far to one side and it's kind of swung a little bit back, and I think into a more of a normalized route. But we're certainly seeing in the types of questions that are being asked, whether it's again around different incidents that we've had, or different pen tests that we've conducted, other things there. It's again shaping that story around what we're doing to protect our most critical assets, and whether that's our data, our equipment, our ability to operate. We look at those areas, and those are certainly questions that we're able to put in, and also get feedback from our board of directors that different areas that we should be looking and considering from areas where they've had exposure to cyber insurance and other issues. So it continues to evolve, and I think that in the industry we're in now, that we'll start to see more and more from our customer audits, that they've typically been quality focused, and we have that with being FDA regulated in that kind of industry, that our customer audits are now starting to teeter into the questions around security side of it, and being able to give specific answers there, and how we know that our areas that we're protecting is also our customers' data and our customers' product, and to make sure that if they're in the middle of a production run and something were to happen because of a cyber incident, then that's dollar impact to them, dollar impact to us, patient impact, across the board. So it's something that in those conversations, it really, you can see people kind of leaning forward and getting into it to understand more and more as it's become more commonplace conversation now.
Right. That's it. It definitely is evolving. We're hearing so much about that space, and how they're trying to use solutions like this to just quantify something as well. But as we look at this, Bryan, by no means are we done, quote unquote. We're still obviously evolving policies and policy groups all the time, and activating other areas. But you and your team are already starting to talk a little bit about potentially additional use cases coming forward. And other security challenges. You're constantly looking at other ecosystem platforms for different purposes. Can you just kind of talk about where you maybe see this industry going, and where we may be able to kind of provide some additional value down the road with future integrations or future platform solutions within the platform.
Yeah, no, and the security space again is so interesting that I forget who said it a couple of years ago, but it's almost like a new vertical is being introduced every day in security. That if there's a new acronym, to be learned, it's certainly in the security space every week as things evolve. From an Elisity perspective, and for us, again, when we mentioned things like the visibility and bringing data from different areas together, that's been something that continues to evolve as we look at what other areas should we have visibility into. We start looking at the data center side of things and understanding how it's going to work with within the workloads as opposed to just the network side. There's I think the core fabric of the solution and how it's able to work and from the learning and simulation side of things, there's a lot of different things that are then able to take place when it really is a lot about aggregation of data and then protection of movement of data. So I'm excited to see where things continue to go, and as we grow with the solution, I look forward to growing together with it.
I have a feeling you're going to continue to be vocal on these topics as we move forward. Well, thank you. That was a great summary of Andelyn and the journey that you've gone on, going back a couple years into really our engagement over the last few months. But Jess, I know that the folks on this call have a ton of questions. So do you want to jump in and let's get some of these in chat, and Bryan and I can answer whatever comes up here.
I do want to do that. That's exactly what I want to do right now, Pete. I want to get into some questions with the audience. And in fact, hang on, let's take these slides away because we don't need slides anymore. We know who you guys are now, and we're going to dive into some audience questions. First of all, I have to say, you guys, such a great conversation, lots of interesting things that we got to cover there. And I do really love when we get into these sorts of the real world implications of some of the things that we're talking about. So Bryan, I want to thank you for your openness and transparency and some really astute observations as we went through. Pete, can I kick off? I'm going to throw a question at you. Are you feeling ready?
I'm ready.
I knew that you were. I could tell. Rock star. Okay, here we go. Let's start with this one here. Our organization has a mix of managed, unmanaged, and Internet of Things devices. How does Elisity handle policy enforcement across such a diverse environment? I think this is a very common question. Lots of infrastructure variety out there. What do you got for us, Pete?
Sure. Well, you're touching on a couple of things: device discovery, and then you're diving into policy. So taking it both ways. I mean, first and foremost, we natively discover any managed, unmanaged, wired, wireless, IT, IoT, IOMT, or OT device that's on the network. We're using the protocols within the access layer and the flows to figure out what those devices are. We then match the device. Our platform will match the device with any external source. In the case of Andelyn, it's what did Bryan, CrowdStrike, Active Directory, and then in some cases there's a CPS solution like a Clarity, Dragos, Tenable. In the case of a ServiceNow, for a CMDB platform. So our system will on a daily basis ping those, and each device will match against that. So we'll really understand the triangulation of every device that's out there. From there, we'll work with the customer, because a customer like Andelyn, you're doing, Bryan, policies in a couple different ways. You're doing some, like your global IT policies are just like global phones, and it's all in one policy group. But there are some of the OT devices are either subnet based in terms of their groupings, Bryan, and then some of them are grouped in custom ways based on what manufacturing line they're in or something like that. So it's a multitude of different ways. And even, in the case of most of our OT customers, some of those devices are still matched to Excel spreadsheets, Jess. Like some people haven't, gone past converting things over. So we're matching across multiple systems. we're grouping things in multiple ways in the same universe, and then applying policy as such. I don't know, Bryan, if you want to kind of expand on that one, but
yeah, no, I think you hit it. I mean, some of the things that when we're trying to bring data in from things like CrowdStrike, looking at our Intune devices, which I know is coming soon, being able to then show what should apply where into which environment, and having that visibility is really the key to really being able to manage it. So getting it all in one area helps us in our policy, creation and enforcement, understanding what the delineation between those areas is for sure.
Yeah, and I see there's another question by Paul here about how flexible do the zero trust principles need to be. Again, I think Bryan, your use case is very, especially for OT. We have a lot of OT customers that have a labs group, have a manufacturing group, and then have a carpet and space group. And some of their sites are converged IT and OT, and some of their sites are pure OT. So it has to be very, very flexible in the way that we're doing the policies, because it is often one cloud control center. So in some cases, our customers want to be able to enforce policies across site. In some cases, the customers don't need that because they have big firewalls that are blocking and sort of isolating each individual site. So being flexible across the different ways is paramount to the solution.
Yeah. If I could add something to that too, like I think there's a level of like rigid flexibility that's required. That there's certain guidelines that you don't necessarily want to go outside of, and that's where you add the rigidity in. But then you might need flexibility in certain things. So as you mentioned, like within our lab areas, you want to start more closed than open. You want to have things, if you're going zero trust, you don't start with everything being able to talk to everything, right? And I think that's how most of the networks are inherently designed, with these less traffic flow standard segmentation rules, which you want to go against that, but then understanding within each of those groups, maybe the flexibility occurs within a group or a group of devices, and then you continue to whittle down from there. So it's a great question, and I think there's definitely a level of flexibility, and the solution helps with that.
Can I ask you a follow-up? Oh, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was just going to comment. I saw both Phil and Tim also went to the encryption question. It's a very deep architecture question there. Depending on what type of encryption you're talking about, a lot of variables in that one. I would love to do a deep dive on that with our architecture team, Tim and Paul, on those questions, because depending on what type of encryption you are, what solutions you have, it does not impact the performance, but we have to architect it properly, obviously. So, that's a sort of a custom question that we handle on a regular basis. But go ahead, Jess. I know you got some bigger or some other ones.
Well, so follow-up is for Tim and Paul. Please do reach out and keep that conversation rolling. Yes. But you know what, Pete, there was a couple of questions that came in that I think we're hitting a little bit around where you guys were just going, and that is a little bit on the complexity side here. So we did get a question from someone who's saying that in their organization, they feel like there's a little bit of pushback from the IT team because they feel like microsegmentation is too complex. So wondering, and maybe Bryan, actually, if you have any examples that you found that worked well in your team for how you kind of handled maybe a little change management, the internal comms around this program?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. One, in IT, our job is difficult to make other people's job easier, right? I think if you don't have that tenet going into your job in IT, you're probably in the wrong line of business. We're going to always be in a complex situation. It's technically complex. There's so many moving dynamics. There's external change, everything that we have to be able to handle. And so if your team is facing some challenges with that, I think then getting some of that org change management training, understanding other things in place, I think is very helpful. I'm blessed to have a great team, right? So I'm not going to lie on that. There's pushback at times, but we all have a great relationship where we push the envelope with each other, always looking to, as I said, get further faster. That's one of the mottos that we're trying to do. And we were fortunate with starting out and building things out that, again, going through the challenges with the initial build out, but to really design our thought process and guiding principles up front. So, security is baked in mind in every conversation. It's like, is this adding to our highest level of security? Is this going to, just like as a company, in a bioscience company, just going to have patient impact? Is this going to deliver a quality product? Are we going to be able to
to deploy this solution securely, and is this the best way to do it? Is it not going to impact performance? So I think once you get the right solution in front of folks, the light bulbs went off, right? And with our network architect and our VCs, so as soon as they see this, their eyes lit up and like, okay, how do we get more? And so it's that's when the buy-in really happens, and they were part of the decision, right? So it wasn't something that was thrown at them. So I think explaining how it makes their lives easier as well. So what's in it for me aspect, as well as the me, we, it. So we have a more secure workplace. The what's in it for me from those positions, it actually makes their job easier to maintain secure and single platform visibility, all that. And is like it works in our environment and helps us again further faster.
And Jess, just to piggyback on that one, I think with the word complexity, we look at that in three different domains, I would say. One is being able to deploy a solution in a environment that cannot be disrupted. I mean, your environment, Bryan, other OT environments, healthcare, hospitals, the 24/7 can't be disrupted. So it has to be able to be deployed in a no hardware, non-agent way that is not sitting in the data plane and can't cause an outage. So that's first and foremost. So we take extra focus on that specific element of complexity, and to that end, on existing infrastructure, whether that infrastructure is Cisco or Arista or Juniper or HPE, whatever the underlying elements are, to be able to deploy in those types of mixed environments. Two is then to give you, Bryan, confidence to be able to deploy policies quickly. Using some of our techniques like the simulation mode and seeing the traffic flows and the details of those traffic flows prior to actually activating the policies. That is sort of eliminating the complexity of just pressing the red button and feeling like, holy crap, things just went really sideways. And then third, and Bryan, I mean, you're a testimonial of this, is the operational complexity, or eliminating operational complexity by not having to hire an entirely new staff to manage a solution like this. I think we have a weekly meeting. You guys monitor the platform. We make the changes as a collective team on a weekly basis, but it's not overwhelmingly time consuming for the team on a week to week basis, right?
Yeah. Sure. We went from plug and pray to plug and play.
Yeah. I see Sujith on that. Is how simple or complex it is to integrate into existing security infrastructure. That's again a sort of a question that depends on your what your infrastructure is, Sujith. But we'd love to have that conversation. I mean, we integrate with dozens and dozens of other solutions, both from the side of pulling additional device information into the platform and additional information into the solution, pushing different things out to other solutions, and then finally, logs and analytics into things like Cribble and Splunk. So it's the way we do that is through APIs. So it's integrating with CrowdStrike, Bryan, would that take you 8 minutes? It was sort of a nothing event. So depending on what the solution is and what the architecture is, it's very easy, or maybe requires a longer discussion on that one. Jess, go ahead.
I was sorry, but before I continue, Bryan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Pete nailed it.
Pete nailed it. Pete, A+ across the board. Also, I put up a shiny slide because I like this slide. And the other, I think actually this is going to feed in well to the next question that I want to get into with you, because we have a few folks in the audience that have had some problems with workflows breaking, and this is always an issue, right? Is implementation and balancing frustration. This kind of goes back to where we started when we were talking about having the right change management plan. There's a lot of psychology that goes along with technology. So I'm going to ask this question to you here, Pete, and then maybe Bryan, if you have some examples that you've seen in your organization. One issue we've had in the past is segmentation policies breaking legitimate workflows. This causes a lot of frustration for our users. So how does Elisity handle policy testing and validation in order to prevent that?
Yeah. Yeah. I glossed over the word simulation mode. So what we do is when we enter with a customer like Andelyn or any other, what we do is we first build the policy groups. So you, the customer, will have obviously some global policy groups like mobile devices, phones, printers, things like that you want to put in sort of a global grouping, and they'll all get the same policy. Then there are obviously some custom local policies, especially in OT. Once they're grouped, they're placed in a matrix, and so manufacturing line 1 against manufacturing line 2. Should those two things communicate with each other? Phones and printers, should those things communicate with each other? We work with the customer immediately to say should these things do it, and kind of fill out the matrix red green from that perspective. But before we actually do it, we do it in simulation mode. So we simulate what would happen if we activate these policies, and it'll show if it would do exactly what you just described, or what that use case described, where would it block X and Y from that workflow from happening before you would actually activate that policy, and show which device, which flow is actually the one that would get denied. So I think that's, Bryan, what gave you and the team a lot of confidence to deploy the policy so quickly in your OT environments, because we simulated it for a couple of weeks at a time, and then the couple that actually were denied, there was either something was miscast in the wrong policy group, or there was a legitimate reason why those two things actually should communicate with each other, and your team just didn't maybe know it.
Yeah, I don't think I can state enough how valuable that simulation exercise is. So again, security is visibility, right? And visibility into what's happening. Now, again, we had more luxury being relatively new in our network architecture design, our facility build out, implementation of everything there. I know that not everyone has that luxury. Companies have been in the past that certainly don't have that luxury. Things were put together using yesterday's technology. Some things were put together and people did that and have left 4 times over. And somehow it still works, but nobody really knows how it works. So pressing that button to say we're not going to stop this from talking to that could shut down operations. And how does that impact the business? So really being able to see it when it's running and understanding that is so key as a precursor to activating policies.
Guys, I hate to say this because I'm really enjoying this conversation and could talk to you all day, but we are getting to our last 5 minutes here. So we're going to have to start to bring it to a close. What I'm going to do is I'd like to wrap up with kind of a final thought from each of you. So if you could give me one key takeaway, either that you'd want the audience members to walk away thinking about, or something that you'd like to see them take action on. Bryan, maybe I'll ask you to kick us off, and then Pete, if you want to bring us home on that one.
Yeah, no, it's for me, it's I think if you're on this webinar, it's a great first step, right? That you're challenging the status quo, you're challenging where you're at, you're challenging either your existing solutions, your existing vendors, whatever it is there, and you're not comfortable with the old way of working. I mean, in today's day and age, everything we're expected to get it at a fingertip. ChatGPT can do whatever in 3 seconds for me, answer everything. It doesn't have to be complex. And I think when you talk to the folks at Elisity, you'll find a well-architected solution, a great support staff, great organization, one that we're really happy to be working with here. And I highly suggest you continue that conversation. And if you need any side comments, questions from me, like me and my team are more than happy to have those questions and work with folks on it too. So it's been a great experience.
Oh, I love that.
And I think there's obviously a lot of questions unanswered here, and we'd love to dive into each of them. Please check us out, elisity.com/demo request. One of our SEs will come out and do a demo for you really quickly. And then, of course, seeing is believing. Bryan, we did our POC with you guys in your production environment. It took a day. It's pretty straightforward. It's non-disruptive. So we welcome the opportunity to show, not tell, and really dive in with each and every customer that's on the call here. So thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I love that. And I love that there's a few different ways that we can reach out and follow up. Booking the demo, I do have to say that's always just the best way. There's so many different specific use cases and things that you want to delve into that are important to your organization. So booking that personalized demo, getting into that one-on-one conversation, I think that's a great follow-up. And Arena has a really fun she's going to run a little link for us. So if you missed that slide that we just had, oh, look at that, book a demo. So click on the link there, book your demo, make sure you do that. We also have a couple of follow-ups for you in the docs tab. So there's a couple of different handouts. Pete, we've got the solution brief, the Elisity microsegmentation, accelerate zero trust security in weeks, not years. That's a major theme that we've gotten into today. We also have that buyer's guide, microsegmentation buyer's guide for 2025. And then we've got a wonderful report on IEC 62443 segmentation with Elisity enhancing industrial control system security. These are all great takeaways. Pete, if you sort of could give that one place to start, do you think the demo is the best option?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I say, I do suggest that there's a couple more questions that are popping up. If you can, we'll reach out via email or whatever to kind of follow up on some of this. But yeah, book the demo at elisity.com/demo request, and we'll get going.
Perfect. And you're exactly right, Pete. To anyone out there that asked a question that we did not get to in the conversation today, we are going to make sure that this gets sent on to the team. So you will get answers back. So keep those questions coming in, even if it's still kind of rattling around in your brain right now, get it in and we will make sure that you get a response back. Pete and Bryan, I want to thank both of you for joining me here today. It has been so much fun chatting with you.
Thank you. And thanks, Bryan.
Yep.
All right. Well, we are going to bring things to a close now. I wish we didn't have to. I feel like there's lots more to cover here. And as Pete said, there's a lot of questions left. So I'm so excited to see all of that engagement and response from everyone out there. I told you all we wanted to have a fun conversation with you, and you all did not disappoint. Some really fantastic questions coming in. I want to say I'm seeing all the thank yous in the chat too. I see you, Jesse. Thanks on back to you. And I see you, Christian. And we have Sujith. Sujith asked some great questions. Say, Paul, always with the great questions. Amazing. Michael, I love this. All the great highs and hellos coming in as we bring this to a close. So a reminder, visit that docs tab. Make sure you've got those handouts. That's a great way to recall all of the information that we just got into today and expand that even further, start to take action in your own organization. So make sure you've got those. Arena is also going to turn on a survey in just a second here. So we would love to hear from you. We want to get an idea if we're hitting you with the right insights at the right time in your world. So make sure you do take a second and fill that out. And while you're doing that, I have one more little piece of business here today, little piece of excitement, and that is, of course, our prize giveaway. So we have a $250 Amazon gift card going to someone who is here live and present at the webinar and probably a little bit lucky today. That special someone is Nick Birchfield from Ohio. Nick Birchfield from Ohio. Congratulations to you, Nick. Now, as always, we will follow up with you after we wrap our webinar. You guys can't see this, but I can. Pete was applauding you off stage. He's applauding your win there. So congratulations. But I have to say with that, on behalf of the actual Tech Media team, a giant thank you to Elisity for making this webinar possible, and very especially to Pete and to Bryan for joining us, again, for having that wonderful open conversation, getting into those real world examples, as well as some of the high level strategies and approaches, best practices. There was a lot of takeaways from the conversation today. And so, of course, I really do have to bring that thank you around to all of you, because each one of you has taken time out of your day today. And I know how hard it is when you are dealing with everything that's happening in the day-to-day, all the many fires that go, oh man, Bryan had the best way. Our lives are difficult so that other people's lives can be easy. All of your lives are difficult and complex and confusing on a daily basis, and it is evolving constantly. So there's no time to catch our breaths. And these opportunities to come together and share our ideas together and learn together are where we get that chance to get out in front of it, to make our lives a little bit easier, to take away a few of those pain points. So I hope you're feeling charged up and ready to take away some pain points in your organization, to smooth some things forward. And what do we say? In weeks, not years, right? In a very short period of time. So I hope you'll continue this conversation. I can't wait to see where you all go from here. I very much hope that I'll get to see you at a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.